In the opening chapters of Revelation, the risen Christ stands among 7 golden lampstands. Each lampstand represents a church, a real congregation in a real city in 1st century Asia Minor. But for nearly 2,000 years, the historicist tradition held that these 7 churches were more than local congregations. They were a prophetic map of the entire Christian age. 7 cities, 7 letters, 7 ages, and a pattern that has repeated through every century of the church's existence. The first is Ephesus. Christ commends them for their doctrine, for testing false apostles, for enduring hardship without growing weary. They had discernment. They had endurance. But he has one charge: you have abandoned your first love. The Ephesian church had correct theology and declining devotion. They knew the truth but had stopped burning for it. Historically, this maps to the Apostolic age, the generation that had walked with Christ, that had seen the resurrection, that burned with a zeal no persecution could extinguish. But even in that golden era, the warning was already there. Orthodoxy without love is a lampstand about to go dark. The second is Smyrna. I know your affliction and your poverty, Christ says, but you are rich. He tells them a synagogue of Satan is slandering them. And he gives them a promise that has echoed through every persecuted church since: be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Historically, Smyrna represents the age of Roman persecution, from Nero's flames in AD 64 to Deocletian'S great persecution at the turn of the 4th century. 2.5 centuries of empire against church. The faith survived. More than survived, it grew. The blood of the martyrs became the seed of the church, as Tertullian wrote. The more Rome tried to crush Christianity, the more it spread. The third is Pergamum. Christ calls it the place where Satan's throne sits. The church held fast to his name, but some had embraced the teaching of Balaam, the principle of compromise, of mixing worship with worldly power. Balaam could not curse Israel, so he seduced them into idolatry. Historically, Pergamum maps to the post-Constantinian era. When Christianity became the state religion of Rome, the church gained political power but lost spiritual purity. Pagan practices were absorbed. Temples were converted but not cleansed. The cross was carried into battle. Sunday worship replaced Sabbath observance. The compromise had begun, not through outright denial, but through the slow merging of church and empire. The fourth is Thyatira. Christ commends their works, love, faith, service, endurance, and notes that their latter works exceed the first. But he condemns toleration of a false teacher. You have allowed that woman Jezebel to teach, he says, and she leads my servants astray. Historically, this is the medieval papacy. The institution that preserved learning and built cathedrals also accumulated political power, sold indulgences, and placed human tradition above the word of God. The works were real. The charity was real. The corruption was also real. For 1,000 years, the Church of Thyatira ruled Christendom, mixing the genuine with the counterfeit, and calling the mixture holy. The fifth is Sardis. Christ's words are devastating: you have the reputation of being alive, but you are dead. The church had form without power, ritual without renewal. They maintained the outward appearance of faithfulness while the substance had evaporated. Historically, Sardis represents the period of formal religion, the centuries when Christianity was the default faith of Europe, attended out of obligation rather than conviction. Baptism was universal but conversion was rare. The outward structure remained. The inner fire had gone out. People went to church because it was expected, not because they had encountered the living God. The sixth is Philadelphia. Christ opens a door that no one can shut. You have kept my word, he says, and have not denied my name. The Church of the Open Door. Historically, this is the Reformation. When Luther nailed his theses to the door in Wittenberg, when Calvin opened the scriptures in Geneva, when Knox thundered from Scottish pulpits, the Bible was unsealed. The door of knowledge that Rome had bolted shut was flung open. Christ himself had opened it. And Rome could not close it again. The Reformation was not merely a political upheaval. It was the reopening of the scriptures to ordinary people, the same word that had sustained the Apostolic Church now restored to the congregations of Europe. The seventh is Laodicea, the most uncomfortable of the seven. Christ says nothing good about this church. Not one word of commendation. You are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, and I will spit you out of my mouth. They are blind, naked, and wretched, yet they say, I am rich, I have prospered, I need nothing. Historically, Laodicea represents the modern age, the church of material comfort, of cultural Christianity, of theological compromise dressed up as tolerance. It is the church that has everything except the one thing that matters, the presence of Christ at its own door. 7 ages. A pattern that repeats: faithfulness, compromise, judgment, renewal. The historicists did not see this as speculation or eisegesis. They saw Providence, God revealing the arc of church history in advance, written in symbols before it unfolded in events. Irenaeus saw it in the 2nd century. Victorinus saw it in the 3rd. The Reformers confirmed it. For 1800 years, this was the mainstream reading of these chapters. And the pattern is not just historical. It is personal. Every generation faces the same questions Ephesus faced. Have you abandoned your first love? Every congregation wrestles with Pergamum's dilemma: how much of the world can you absorb before the world absorbs you? Every believer hears Laodicea's warning: you content with comfort when Christ is calling you to something deeper? Christ stands at the door and knocks. He has always been standing there. Through every age, through every compromise, through every renewal, the invitation remains the same. Return. Come back. Be faithful. The 7 churches are not just a map of the past. They are a mirror for the present. And the question they ask is not, what age are we living in, but what kind of church are we becoming?